Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. I would hold up my Monopoly scratch off in the Maryland lot, but I haven't picked them up yet because the Super Bowl's coming. The Cup of Super Bowl begins at Costas in Dundalk on Monday the 3rd. I'll be telling everybody about that all week long. Let me just do a real quick rundown of that. Luke's going to be here. We're going to talk Super Bowl. We're going to talk about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. We're going to be at Costas on the 3rd. We're going to be at Fadley's on the 4th. We're going to be at Coco's on the 5th. We're going to be at State Fair in Catonsville on the 6th. We're going to be at Cooper's on the 7th. It's all brought to you by friends at the Maryland Lottery, and we're doing it for various food pantries in the communities that we are serving, including Dundalk and Costas. We have a Super Bowl matchup. We have a hell of a week here ahead. Looking down on my docket, it almost feels like I'm going to New Orleans and sitting on Radio Row because Bob Ryan will be gracing us with his presence this week. Mike Nolan, former defense coordinator, head coach of the San Francisco 49ers. Jamal Lewis will be here. They're having a big hootenanny down at the stadium on Super Bowl Sunday with Verizon. My wife is a Verizon team member, so we're Team Verizon around here in the general sense. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and get down to the stadium on the 9th for Super Bowl Sunday. Ross Tucker's going to be here. Ira Kaufman will be here. Sam Cavaris of Woodlawn, Maryland, and Jacksonville. These are all Hall of Fame voters. We have a Hall of Fame vote up with Steve Smith, Marshall Yanda, as well as Terrell Suggs. And last but not least, Luke, I think you've heard of this guy. He's a little maligned around here. I don't know that he's got any skin in the game in Philly because he's from Jersey, but Joseph Vincent Flacco will be joining us here at some point this week. It's almost like a real Super Bowl week. Almost makes you want to get out of New Orleans, get out of bed at 5 in the morning and put on a jacket because it'll be freezing down there by the time we get there. And, up and down Canal Street and you and me drinking those awful Pat O'Brien hurricanes that you like that I vomit. And so we're skipping all of that. We're going to do charity next week. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Yeah, in a former life, I'd have a hurricane or two, but the thought of that now, not so much. Give me a good meal, which you can
Have you
find
had a
plenty of
hangover
those.
lately? Because I saw the one you had in New Orleans 10 years ago. It
No,
wasn't good.
no,
That was
no
a bad day
hangovers,
for you,
and
dude. Like, you felt really bad that A, you're with your boss, and B, you just felt bad. And
that
C,
was
there's
that was
game
not
day.
that was not Super Bowl week. That was 2 years later.
I know. Did you
Yeah, the
throw up in
Monday
the
night
Superdome
game.
that night when we were up on the roof?
Wait, what'd you say?
Did you throw up in the Superdome?
No, 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 no. I wasn't like I had a headache.
Can we do bro talk for just a minute here? Because we don't, Philly's in the game, so the bros are all out. They're not greasing the poles or
I
rioting or
mean, I
whatever they're
can
doing.
do as much bro talk as possible as a deacon at my church,
Well,
and
no, no, no.
an older, wiser version
Well,
of Luke Jones than I was a
reformed.
decade ago.
It's a reformed ministry. It's fine.
Sure, sure.
Deacon Jones, bless me, Deacon, for I have sinned. I have stepped into the
We all
pulpit.
have.
Right, but different than a lot of people you meet. I really was confirmed in CCD, and I held I mean, I was an altar boy with Johnny Rollo. So even after all of that, I found myself in New Orleans as a young man. And this was the Super Bowl that was the Drew Bledsoe, Brett Favre Super Bowl.
Okay.
It was the first Super Bowl where I really went and set up on Radio Row. Now, I was on Radio Row at the Minneapolis Super Bowl, which almost was this Super Bowl, right? Bills, Redskins, 90 in the Minneapolis one. I was there with Keith Mills. I was in their Radio Row there was a little bit like a baseball card convention at the Holiday Inn down here on Cromwell. It was just it was a little function room. It's the room where they put the media now to work. It's the media workroom at the
Mhm.
Hyatt in Minneapolis. So that was 1992. I had been on the radio 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Stedman got me tickets. I was not a media member, but I was on the air. I fished guests. I fished Keith Mills from there on a payphone to do Kenny Albert's radio show that became my radio show in January 1992. So in 93, I did not go to the Super Bowl, the Leon Lett game. 94. 95, I started going to every Super Bowl. That was the year the Ravens were moving here. It's the year Marvin Lewis was the defensive coordinator of the Steelers. It was the Switzer Tempe Super Bowl. I went onto that raid. Now I'm Nasty Nestor by then. I have a show. didn't have a station, but I was on 1360 broadcasting from the Towson Sheraton by that point for sure, 95. So we're getting the football team. We don't know their name. It's in dispute. Viviano says we might get the Bengals and there's going to be a swap. There were things going on in January of 96 that were messy. That was that Super Bowl. Marvin's on the field. O'Donnell throws the picks, all of that stuff. I did Radio Row 2 of those days for my own show. Spiro Marikis hosted the show, and I got Dick Shapp did my show from there. The nicest man. But so I did the Radio Row thing. But the real Radio Row, where I put equipment together, and my God, the amount of equipment we needed to broadcast live in 1997, January of 97, end of the first Vinny Testaverde year. Kevin Byrne didn't have a press box name for him in the corner, and they were still honoring real media members back then. So in 1997, I went down to New Orleans and set up to do Radio Row. And it was set up in the Hyatt, which is a circular hotel with elevators that are glass that go through it. When you were a kid, you saw it because they brought ESPN, Tom Jackson, Chris Berman, they were there. It looked like Christmas. It, looks like the Opryland Hotel a little bit. So they set the radio people up throughout the entire hotel. If there wasn't a room, I was just on a veranda with, I don't know, Ricky Waters and Randall Cunningham and Jerome Bettis and Daryl Green sitting next to me. But there was a sports talk show host named Mike North, legend. He was a hot dog vendor on the south side of Chicago. And he got a radio show, and it was popular. Let me tell you, it's popular. Because in Chicago, they loved the Bulls. Oh, my God, the Bulls in the 90s. So he made a career doing this shtick. He's still alive. He's a friend of mine. He's nuts. Tell him I said so. But Mike North was there, and he was big leaguing me. R.I.P. to Bob Euchre, by the way. But he was big leaguing me in a way that was fun. Oh, you got a shtick in Baltimore. Yeah, you got a team now. So we're out on Bourbon Street, and he's trying to show me how to grow hair on my chest in various ways. There was a house of ill repute that we ran into. I know you're going to find this hard to believe. Paul Schaefer and Dan Aykroyd were in a house of ill repute in New Orleans that we ran into. We had some drinks with them. So I'm drinking beer, and it was like the Richie Cunningham thing in Happy Days. They give you the beer in like little 6-ounce, 8-ounce cups, and it's all draft, and you don't know what it is. And Scotty P from Amici's, I love you, Scotty P, even though your team lost on Sunday. Heel. Scotty P was with me. It was just the two of us. And Hennessy flew down, and ZZ Top played. And last thing I know, they were high-fiving Fred McGriff, and we thought Steve was dead. It was one of those. It was a New Orleans night. I mean, we're talking like a Hangover, the movie with the tiger in the bathroom kind of night, right? I mean, it involved Fred McGriff. It involved the Allman Brothers. I mean, it was crazy. But Mike North, on the Thursday night of the end of the week, I went out on Bourbon Street with him because he was barking at me all week on Radio Row. Hey, kid, we're going to take you out. I'm going to show you my town. I'm like, you're from Chicago. It doesn't matter. So I was so hungover on that Friday that I was driving the porcelain bus in the men's room at the Hyatt on Radio Row. I went on the air at 2:00 then. At 1:57, I said to Scott, you might be hosting the show today. So this is amateur hour, 30 years ago. It's ancient history. And this is why I don't need another New Orleans Super Bowl. And I don't need another Mahomes. This is a good football game, dude. And I'll tell you what, we can talk about the Bills. We can talk about the Commanders and whatever. I was underwhelmed by the early game. The late game was obviously compelling. I feel bad for Buffalo, but these are the two best teams. Don't we want that?
Sure. Well, I mean, what we want locally is the Ravens to be in the game. But it's funny. I just have to go back when you were going back to that timeline and reminiscing. The thought popped in my head. Okay, 1996. That was 5 years before Tom Brady. arrived and the Patriots arrived.
Drew Bledsoe is in his awful
Brady
uniforms. Ugh.
Brady did that for 20 years. For the better part of 20 years, Joe Flacco and a couple others with exceptions, but it was the Patriots over that entire period of time that was Darth Vader. And then it immediately goes to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Now, 5 of the last 6 years they've gone to the Super Bowl. I mean, it really is remarkable. But yeah, I thought it was interesting because you saw a few Ravens players. Marlon Humphrey was the big one that I saw on social media. He made the comment, and I saw a few other Ravens fans, reporter Ravens Twitter types, make the comment that the game that really stood out the most for the Ravens this year, being a game that they really truly lost, was that Philadelphia game. And the fact that they, especially Philadelphia in the second half, fourth quarter, Saquon Barkley takes over. They ran the ball against a run defense that you know, stopped just about everyone, right? And Buffalo obviously had some success in the first half last week against the Ravens run D, but you look at it and you made the comment. Philadelphia, I think, I mean, Detroit, if they had not been ravaged by injuries on the defensive side of the ball, I would have liked to have seen what that looked like. I mean, that was a pretty extreme list of injuries that their defense suffered over the course of the season. But Philadelphia, offense, defense, able to run the ball. Even if Jalen Hurts doesn't put up big numbers as a passer, he's got A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. So it's not as though he didn't have weapons. And that defense, we talked about that defensive front and the problems they gave the Ravens back in early December.
And by the way, we also, when they were chewing up the Commanders and scoring points, I remember you and I having long conversations about, well, I mean, Jaden Daniels is good, but the defense isn't any good. And the Washington defense, and in the end, that did them in, right? Like,
Yeah,
just you can't do this without being balanced, right? And that goes for the Greatest Show on Turf Rams. That goes for any of the Peyton Manning teams that weren't good enough
sure.
when the Patriots were, because they would rent Chad Brown at the end of a year, and like we rented Kyle Van Noy and sort of slobber knock teams defensively. You have to be able to stop. Name it, Josh Allen, Brett Favre, pick your era, John Elway, whatever it is. You got to go out there and man up and play defense at the end of a game. And even Buffalo couldn't do it to get the ball back at the end of the game on Sunday night to give Josh Allen one more chance. If your defense can't get the ball back, you're not going to win 4 of these games in January. You're not. You're not going to win these games 41-38 every week. You're not.
Yeah, well, and the other part of that's true, and I don't disagree. They turned the ball over 4 times. I mean, again, you go back to Ravens Bills, and we talked about that a lot. We'll be talking about that all off season, right? We'll be talking about it next year when those teams clash. You look at these playoffs, and I get it. Buffalo didn't lose the turnover battle on Sunday night in Kansas City, but you look at these games: Washington against Philly, the Ravens last week. When you turn the ball over 3 or 4 times in a game, you're going to lose unless you take it away 3 or 4 times. You're going to lose 95% of the time. I mean, that's what you're talking about. When it's a -2 in the turnover department, you lose like 80% of the time. I think that was the last analytics number that just
And by the way, I think
history
it's
has
even
suggested
more
that.
disconcerting when you think about building your football team to play in, I don't want to say dome conditions, but just normal conditions, whatever
Yeah,
normal conditions would be. And then you find yourself in a game with these skill position players like Lamar, and you're in ice. And this goes back to my Houston Oilers back in 1980 trying to win on the ice in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh squirting the field down when the Raiders showed up in the 70s, because it is the great equalizer of the football on both sides. I mean,
sure.
unless you take the air out of the football, which Tom Brady figured out how to do that too. And that's not me starting Deflategate. That is legitimate. Take the air out of the football and it's not going to come out. And that peanut punch thing that we saw happening on Sunday night a little bit more in the AFC Championship game than maybe we saw Marlon Humphrey trying it around here during the course of the year. The peanut punch thing is enough. and getting up and trying to run with the football after you've been down and not having control of the ball and all of that. But the icy night thing that is just unpredictable, unaccounted for. And even in the game last week with the Ravens and the Bills, it wasn't supposed to snow during the game. Like that was never really the forecast, but it did. And Lamar on that back turn, trying to do something he's done a million times on a million playgrounds successfully, can hold on to the ball. It's made even worse, the great equalizer for the Ravens to be eliminated this year, that they went and played on an icy night and kicked the ball around. I can't even blame them for that. You know what I mean? Like, it's an icy night. But Sunday night wasn't icy in Kansas City, and given the ball, Kansas City was sloppy.
Well, I think, I mean, first of all, I will blame you've got to take care of the football. It's more challenging in the elements, no question about that. And the example I'll use is look how well Buffalo took care of the football last week in conditions that were worse in Orchard Park than they were in Kansas City. Now, they didn't lose any, but Buffalo fumbled 4 times on Sunday. That game, as close as it was, as entertaining as it was, Kansas City deserved the win. They were better. They were better. But that game, Buffalo had some, and everyone will talk about the spot on fourth down, and I get that, right? And I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment of a multi-billion-dollar business in the NFL should have better technology to handle
Ship the
measuring.
ball, dude. Let's go.
Sure. But
Yeah.
that said, Buffalo fumbled 4 times, recovered all 4. Josh Allen, statistically, you look at the game and say, oh, he had a good game. I don't think Josh Allen played a great game. I think his first 2 passes could have, should have been intercepted on the opening drive. I think Buffalo had some things that even went their way in that regard. When you put the ball on the ground 4 times and recover all 4, that's not that's not making the football gods happy. Let's put it that way. So I think it comes
He
down
did
to
do
this.
something I never seen anybody do, which was the defender had held his guy in the route. He pointed, got the flag, and then threw a meatball.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't say that I've seen that a whole lot in the history of the game, literally.
sure,
Like even
sure.
Tony Romo is deked by it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, okay, I guess he saw that.
But
Although
he
I
threw
remember,
some meatballs to your point. Yeah, he really
yeah,
did. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think this felt a little more Josh Allen earlier in his career than the Josh Allen that we saw last week against the Ravens, for example, where he didn't play a great football game, but he did a great job protecting the football. But I'll still come back to I think it was much more evident in the Washington Philadelphia game. Philadelphia was just much better than Washington. And that's taking nothing away from Jaden Daniels, who is already one of my favorite players in the league, which makes me feel conflicted because I've never had any affection for that team down the road.
Heel, not hail, heel.
But I love that kid. I think he's on his way to already being the best quarterback in the NFC, although Jalen Hurts.
We got to do a whole segment on that because, I have a lot of angst about the Washington football team.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, let's see.
and to be honest with you, it's not that I dislike the Eagles or, I'm at the point where I like football and that's fine. And I like the Houston Oilers and they can't win a Super Bowl and never will again. And the rest
Yeah.
of it, as a journalist of doing this for 40 years, I just sort of watch it. But the Washington thing, I like Dan Quinn so much and I've always liked him. My wife and I like him, have
Yeah.
spent time in Salisbury and like all that. So I can't really root against him. And even all of the long suffering people that I used to, like Scotty P. I just mentioned Scotty P. 30 years ago, we're down doing our thing. He was making fun of me, little purple Barney outfits. I mean, I remember it vividly being at the pool at the Hard Rock in Vegas with him, reading all of Kevin Burns' notes on Eric Turner and Vinny Testaverde and, Leroy Horde and, Pepper Johnson and just being made fun of openly by Redskins fans. And I mean, like what's happened to them as an Oriole fan, I don't feel like I need to rub it in anymore. And just pictures of Dan Snyder, he's the biggest weasel there ever was.
Sure.
And the whole part of like disliking them as a Baltimorean, I don't want to say I put down the sword on it a little bit, but my God, the last 30 years for these poor SOBs. I mean, I have friends that are heartbroken about it, but they got a quarterback to your point, right?
Yeah, and they have a new owner. And I'm not saying that Joshua Harris is the best owner in pro sports, but when you upgrade from Daniel Snyder, it's like what we talked about with Rubenstein compared to Angelos when it first happened, where you just say, all right, I don't really know what kind of owner this guy's going to be, but I know what the last guy and the last family did. So look, that changes everything. And this is a huge offseason for them. They're going to have a lot of cap space. We'll see what happens. But when you have Jaden Daniels and you see what that did alone, coupled with some savvy veteran additions like Bobby Wagner and Zach Ertz was a really helpful piece for a rookie quarterback. You end up having a season like they had. So, but Philadelphia was better. On the flip side, looking at the AFC, look, I don't think it's a case that Buffalo and the Ravens are less talented than Kansas City, right? I think especially the Ravens. If you look at the roster, top to bottom, Ravens compared to Kansas City, all things being equal, taking the Ravens roster probably, but Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Steve Spagnuolo, Travis Kelce, a team that doesn't beat itself, a team that, as Buck Showalter used to always say about players that were good in the clutch, they have a low heartbeat, a slow heartbeat. That's Kansas City. I mean, they don't beat themselves, and they're just really smart. And I think the last 2 years, especially, when you look at last year, they went through that little bit of a tailspin in late November through Christmas. Remember, they lost to the Raiders on Christmas Day, and everyone at that point was ready to write them off. And they were going to be on the road, and didn't have the number one seed. And they went into Buffalo, won. They went into Baltimore, won. Then this year, they're a team that lost one game, right? Not counting Week 18 when they rested starters and Denver beat their junior high version of the Chiefs, but they lost one game. They weren't all that impressive in the process of going 15-1. As silly, as crazy as that sounds, you know exactly what I'm saying when I say that. And when did they play their best football of the season? They started tuning it up in mid-December, and 32 points on Sunday night. It's their season high in points scored. I mean, it's just they know how to do this. And when you're the Ravens or you're the Bills, that's why last week when there was all this talk about Buffalo, Baltimore being a legacy game for the winner, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. I said it to you at the time, and you agreed with me. It's like, hey, let's pump the brakes here
We'll
because
both be
hey,
wearing suits on the honors night
right?
in New
I mean
Orleans
that's
next
the
week.
thing. I mean,
Like literally, right?
and you look at it in hindsight, and I would have said the same thing if the Ravens had won and lost to Kansas City. Did that game really do anything for Josh Allen when he lost to the Chiefs again the following week? Had the Ravens won and then gone to Kansas City and lost, would that have really done anything for the Ravens and Lamar Jackson? No. I mean, you're still chasing the Chiefs. I mean, it's that simple, and that's why it is just incredible. And as you were reminiscing about mid '90s Radio Row, I was just thinking. I mean, you had 20 years of Brady and the Patriots doing what they did. You know, putting aside Spygate, Deflategate, all, how unlikable they became after a while, all that, putting that aside, just the results on the field. You had 20 years of that literally rolled right into Kansas City. I mean, that the 2018 title game, Patriots beat the Chiefs. And since then, the Chiefs have just dominated the AFC. And it's one of those situations where you think back to all those years, even with Joe Flacco, even, the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger, certainly the Colts with Peyton Manning. It was always, man, if only Brady weren't here, could we have won that many more? And now it's the same thing. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, Josh Allen and the Bills, Burrow and the Bengals, although they've at least, they beat the Chiefs once, although they didn't finish the job at the Super Bowl. But you just look at it and say, man, if that Mahomes guy and the Chiefs, if they weren't there, what would the AFC look like? And right now, I mean, I saw a couple people make the comment late Sunday night that it's very reminiscent of the NBA in the 90s with Michael Jordan, where, I mean, you had lots of Hall of Fame players. And, other than the 2 years when he went off to play baseball with Chris Pica down in Birmingham, I mean, no one else has a chance. So it's impressive for what they've done, but for everyone else, it's a very frustrating feeling. And they played a cleaner game, a better game than Buffalo did, and they're going back to the Super Bowl again.
Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke. Deacon Jones, as we like to say. Not the one with the head slap that Deacon Jones up in Southern Pennsylvania. Although you can watch my conversation with the Deacon Jones talking about getting after Johnny Unitas at Baltimore Positive. It is not a Radio Row week here, but it's going to feel like a Radio Row week. We're going to have a lot of football here this week. Next week, of course, a cup of soup or bowl. We're going to be doing that for various food pantries in the area. All of it brought to you by our friends at Wise Markets, as well as our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I will get the Monopoly tickets to hold up. Man, Super Bowl's in New Orleans. And you get me thinking about all of this because, like, there have been a couple of them. The 9/11 Super Bowl was there. Obviously, our Super Bowl was there. So I feel like I've done this routine before. So the fact that we're not doing it next week, the more I talk about it, though, it does like make me want a pork burger. It does make me want to like get some fried shrimp. But you know what? I found out that Costas has fried shrimp. Don't ask me why I didn't know this the first 51 years of my life, but the last couple of years I've been getting fried shrimp with proper cocktail sauce at Costas, and it is literally the same recipe and the same shrimp that they use at the Acme Oyster House in New Orleans. So
It's
I figure it
excellent.
saved us a lot of money. I figure I'm probably old enough now that I wouldn't get a hangover, but you never know. I don't trust myself. You know what I mean? On a boat out in the Mississippi. So for all of that, we'll sit back. We're going to talk some football this week. Joe Flacco is going to join us, Jamal Lewis, a whole bunch of old friends, a whole bunch of Hall of Fame voters. Luke and I are going to talk some Hall of Fame. And we're also going to talk about the game, Kansas City, Philadelphia as well. We're going to have Ravens off-season stuff. We're going to have Orioles in-season stuff almost. We're almost getting there. And, of course, next week, we're going to begin our thing at Costas on Monday. We're going to be taking the whole week. I'm not doing the marathon thing next week all day long. I'm doing 12 to 5, noon to 5. We're not going live. It's Monday at Costas, Tuesday at Fadley's, Wednesday at Coco's, Thursday at State Fair, Friday at Cooper's. I need to memorize that because I'm going to be saying it all week long. And I do hope you come out, bring some canned goods, dry goods, good stuff for local food pantries in Dundalk, Catonsville, Towson, Timonium, downtown for sure. I'm going to get the Grace, Hope, and Mission back this year because I love talking to those folks last year too. So I am Nestor. He's Luke. The Super Bowl's still happening. We're not in it, but we are trying hard. We're Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.